May I have a look at the Bhagavad Gita? Do we have a Gita? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama,
Hare Hare, Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. So I offer my obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all of you, because you are Vaishnavas, and therefore the most worshipable in the three worlds. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Avantika, for that introduction. That was really nice. Yeah. And nice Madunga too, spontaneous. So we're really fortunate because, as the Bhagavatam points out, it's rare to get human form. Labvam sadurlabam idam bahusam bhavante manushamartadam anityam apihadira. So if somebody's a little wise, they could take advantage of this temporary form, but which is full of value and which is rarely given by the material nature. And the first function of a human being is to ask questions about the meaning of life. And this will be fruitful because we have an insider who is our well-wisher. That insider is Krishna. He points this out throughout the Bhagavad Gita by saying that I'm in your heart. Krishna, just for a review, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's mentioned in many places. For instance, in the Sri Brahma Samhita, the first person in the universe, Brahma, who comes from Mahavishnu, one of the expansions of Krishna, first performs austerity because he doesn't know where he came from and how he got on the lotus flower itself. But by inquiry, asking, what is the purpose of life and where did I come from? He wants to know what's my origin, which is a very primal instinct of humans. You may notice that human beings, even in the modern day, spend billions, maybe trillions of dollars going into space, going to the bottom of the ocean, digging here and there and trying to figure out where did I come from. This is the same instinct Brahma has when he first comes out into the world and asks the question, what's my origin? And then he hears from Krishna the syllables tapa, which mean that you should perform divine austerity. And this is a theme that comes up throughout the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. That by performing activities that are meant to please the senses of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one gains an inside connection with Krishna. The connection's already there, but it becomes clear when one performs these kinds of austerities. One of the places that it's mentioned is in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the teachings of Rishabhadeva, when he says, Nayam deho deha bhajam nirloke kashtan kama marhate vidbhujamye tapo divyam putrake yena sattvam shudyat yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. In this verse, Lord Rishabhadeva says that one should not try to use the senses the way animals do, just for sense gratification. Because, he points out, if sense gratification is so readily available to animals, and one could argue that they have better facility in many ways for sense gratification than humans do, then how could it be very valuable if it's available so commonly? And he certifies that actually it's not that important for human beings. Of course, it's important to maintain a certain level of sense gratification. Sense gratification is like salt. You don't want too much or too little. You have to have enough to maintain your sanity. Kama senendriya pritir labo jiveti yavata. The Srimad Bhagavatam says, Kama senendriya, the engaging the senses is meant so that you can preserve yourself and be in a healthy state and be of sound mind and body so that you can inquire about the absolute truth, just so you can make the inquiry. So that part of our life is there. It's not that we neglect it altogether, but we know that maintaining ourselves is for a higher cause. And if one does this, actually, then whatever kinds of worldly interaction we have in the way of sense gratification is counted in the realm of pure devotional service. Did you know that? This comes up in the Nectar Devotion in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, because Rupa Goswami points out that there's a natural way in which we may have to ask Krishna for help, and we may have to take time to maintain our bodies and minds in order to be sound enough to perform devotional service. And because we're doing it for that purpose, or because we're asking Krishna for certain kinds of help, then there's a way in which we are still performing pure devotional service. So this is not what's meant by don't perform sense gratification. what's meant is don't become so distracted and make that the goal of your life. In other words, eat to live, don't live to eat. So then he says, do perform what is called tapasya, or take a little bit of trouble in order to do a divine service. Tapo divyam, and then he says putraka, it's purifying, it becomes purified. Have you ever noticed that when you see someone or you see yourself after you've performed some kind of devotional austerity, that you look different and you feel different? And there's a kind of natural euphoria that you feel when you've performed your duty well in Krishna consciousness. Even if you have a good morning practice, one good morning practice, and suddenly the whole world looks a little brighter, and you feel lighter and less inclined to become distracted by all the minutiae that normally might disturb your mind. Have you noticed that? I've noticed too when I was staying at Govardhan this year, and I'd see devotees who would perform the Govardhan Parikrama, and they'd go around the hill. When they'd come back, when I'd see them, I'd say, oh, I can see in your countenance that you just went around Govardhan Hill. You look purified. And so in all practices of devotional service, when one applies oneself, there's a way that we feel the effect of Krishna's presence in our life. So this is called tapo divyam. Divyam means divine, and tapo, those are the first two syllables that Brahma heard when he came out from the lotus. What that is, take some trouble. Tapasya means heat. Put yourself out there for it. Yes.
Well, thank you, Maharaj, for the class. I wanted to ask...
it's not over yet.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask why Krishna want us to do like austerity, like Nirjal or Ekadasi. It's like we feel like so hungry and all. So why he wants us to suffer or perform austerity.
What's real suffering is being at the beck and call of one's senses. Real suffering means that the senses call to us and we say, yes, sir, whatever you say, right away, sir. And we know even as we're cultivating Krishna consciousness, we start to get aware of the fact that actually I should be in charge here. Why are my senses dictating? And why are they forcing me to do things that I don't want to do, I know I shouldn't do? And that's suffering. There is actually no suffering in tapasya. A little bit, but it's very superficial. And it lasts only a little time. And you'll notice also that suffering comes of its own accord to everybody. There's no situation you can find anywhere. Even if you buy yourself a GMC car called a Suburban, which is like driving around in your living room, and you got a house that has 10 rooms, and you move to California, which is as good as it gets, you're still going to have suffering. I mean, someone's going to ruin your frequent flyer mile system, or somebody's going to die, or you're going to get, a slight aberration in your physical body that's going to disturb you and think, why aren't I perfect? I mean, I'm paying enough for having a personal trainer and I eat all the right foods. Why do I have to, have a blemish on me? Or why do I have it's inevitable. As soon as you have a mature body, you're going to suffer. But this is preemptive suffering. You suffer for the right cause. And what happens when you do that is you start to choose which suffering you're going to take. And that suffering, when you're doing it for Krishna, starts to become pleasurable. When you got that going, then you're really in luck. And there is no suffering. Because, I did it myself. I choose my own suffering, and my suffering is I'm going to offer it to Krishna. It's not going to be visited upon me by the material nature. And even though the material nature may bring me so-called suffering because I've already put myself in a position where I don't suffer. This is called maranam before smaranam. When you die to the world, then naturally the world has no more. You're not bought and sold by the material nature because you have a higher master that you're attuned to. So even psychologically, it brings happiness naturally. You brought up fasting. Fasting's such an interesting thing. I mean, if you hang around long enough, all the practices of Krishna consciousness become verified even in scientific society. There's a way in which years ago when we used to fast on Ekadashi, people thought, well, you're going to die. In fact, when I became a vegetarian, my parents thought I was going to die. They took me to a dietitian. And they said, here's what he's eating. He's going to die, right? And they said, no, he won't die. He's doing fine. Leave him alone. And then there was fasting that everyone thought was some kind of crazy cultish thing. But now everyone's doing it. Intermittent fasting, you can't turn, one page of any magazine without intermittent fasting. It's the best thing you could do for yourself. So when one fasts, for instance, there's a question and answer that goes on between the higher self and the lower self. The lower self says, give me something to eat. And the higher self says, I'm not eating today. That's an interesting conversation between the stomach and the tongue, and then you've got the intellect, the buddhi, who says, this is a good idea, even backed up by science nowadays. So y'all just shut up. And then, you experience for yourself. You see the hierarchy. Indriyani prayanyahur indriyabhya param manaha manasastu parabhudiryo bhude paratastu saha. So lowest of all is the senses. Above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intellect. And above the intellect is the soul proper. And above that is the Paramatma, Krishna. So Krishna says, Evam buddhi param buddva samsta bhyatmanamatmanaha jahi shatram mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. He said, get practiced at this buddhi yoga, fortify your intelligence so that it rules. It's ruling because get it fixed up in Shastra and also get it purified so it can take dictation from Krishna, who's right there. And he's giving the dictation. And that by doing this is what putraka means. You're getting purified. Purifying the intelligence. So Krishna then says, by that strong buddhi, then you can overcome the lower nature, which just basically drives us into the next level of birth and death, or the next cycle of birth and death, by being involved in it. So it's not suffering at all, actually. Suffering is completely optional in this world. All kinds of circumstances will be visited upon us, but we have the choice of how to react to them. And the smartest way to react is by following Dharma and following Krishna's instructions. Besides, Prabhupada didn't insist on all kinds of heavy fasting. He just said, don't eat grains and beans. And once when someone was asking about fasting on the Vyasa Puja day, he said, you're already fasting. You don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. That's really considered a fast. I mean, if you don't eat fast food and things like that, people really think, if you don't eat meat in the world, people think, what are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? What do you guys eat? Practically nothing. We're almost starving. So, Tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shud yed yasmad brahma saukyam tvanantam. Saukyam tvanantam means that when you do this, when you follow this path, which is what human life is meant for, then you can start opening up your heart to happiness, which doesn't have a limit. It's not tied to objects in this world that have a beginning and an end. So I did my Chad, and then I read the verse at the end of the Chad, which is, it's up to 21, right? 4:21. So I want to read this verse to you. This is 4:21 in the Bhagavad Gita. I think you'll like it. It says, Nirashiryata chitatma Tyakva sarva parigraha Shariram kevalam karma Kurvanapnoti kilbisham. So nirashi means without desire for the result. Yata, controlled. Chitta atma, mind and intelligence. Tyaktva, giving up. Sarva, all. Parigraha, sense of proprietorship over possessions. So this is one of the aspects of Atma Nivedana. We hear about Sharanagati, and Rupa Goswami explains a little bit about how Sharanagati has several features, and one of them he explains is like when, let's say you have a cow, and then you give your cow to somebody, you no longer have the obligation of taking care of a cow, because when you have a cow, you have to be there 24 hours a day. You can't go away somewhere else. Cow has to be taken care of, or you have to have somebody qualified who'll take care of the cow 24 hours a day. It's like having a child. So if you give your cow to a worthy person, you no longer have the obligation of taking care of the cow anymore. So if you give yourself to Krishna and you say, these fruits of the results, I'm not working for myself anymore, I'm working for Krishna. Now you have no more obligation. It's all for Krishna. So then you'll feel that relief, like you just gave your cow to a worthy person. It's their cow now. And now, so this is the sense in this verse, nirashir, without desire for result. So if you give up the desire for the result of your work, you're no longer entangled in the material world. Because that's the main point of sticking here in this material world and being dragged through the mud, is because I'm attached to the result. And if you give that away to the right person, Krishna, who says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam, I'm the right person to give everything to. You can hand it over to me. That's a relief too. So just hand it over. And of course, it's not your milk either anymore. You don't get to keep the milk, but that's okay. This is our constitutional position. So nirashir, without desire for the result, yata, controlled, chittatma, mind and intelligence. Tyakva, giving up, sarva, all, parigraha, sense of proprietorship over possessions. Shariram, in keeping the body and soul together, kevalam, only, karma, work, kurvan, doing, na, never, apnoti, does require, kilbisham, sinful reactions. Did everyone listen carefully and you know what every word means now? If anyone can say them back, we'll give you one papadam for free. Here's the translation. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person fully engaged in self-realization has very little time to... I love this sentence. A Krishna-conscious person fully engaged in self-realization has very little time to falsely possess any material object. I don't have time for that. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. Now we'll have a round of questions. So ask high-grade questions to bring the conversation to ever higher levels of understanding. Go right ahead. Yes, Mukaravind Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for this nice purport. The first line says that a Krishna conscious person does not expect good or bad in his activities. So even when we, like as you say that no one, like we don't wake up and say that IRS calls us, or like we don't expect that any bad. So how we take these things, good or bad results in his activity, or when we are performing our job, we definitely has some, okay, we perform the good work in job or anything, or even when we do service, when we do our best that, okay, there is a good results. Like when we perform, suppose Janmashtami celebration, we want 10,000 people come. So we wanted good results. We don't want like one person comes.
Well, let's take that example. Let's say we have Janmashtami and one person comes. We can then sit around and mope and say, what happened to the other 9,999 people? You could do this at any gathering. I've seen this before. Used to hold a lot of meetings, and then you invite, and 100 people say, okay, so 75 of them say, I'll try to come, and that means in America that means I'm absolutely not coming. Then the other 20 will say, I'll be there, and they don't come because they have a legitimate excuse. And then, you get 5 people out of 100, and then you could sit there saying, wow, where is everybody? And insult the 5 people that are there because, hey, aren't they somebody? And you could just as well put all your attention into those 5 people and say, oh, this is great, because what am I to do? My duty. Similarly, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, you go, teach Krishna consciousness here, there, and everywhere, and hey, if nobody shows up, preach to the 4 walls. The devotee doesn't care. I can honestly say, I went for many, many months in this Wednesday night class. I mean, we're still sitting here together, but a lot of times nobody came. Sometimes one person came, 2 people came. There was one couple that lived around the corner. There was what? Yeah, Usha and Ramesh. They live like 30 seconds away, so they'd always come. They're such, devoted souls, and they would be there for the Gita class. I honestly didn't care. I wasn't thinking like, where's everybody else? I didn't know there was anybody else anyway. But that's, in the realm of teaching Krishna consciousness, you go out on book distribution, and let's just say, you talk to 100 people and 99 of them slam the door in your face. I personally think it's very funny when people slam the door in my face. Have you ever had that? I mean, I can remember that just the whole incident. It's funny. They open the door, they look at you for like half a second, and and how did you figure that out so fast that you didn't want to talk to me? It's not bad or good. It's just you're doing your duty. And anything that comes up for us, we have to be optimistic and see how to go on serving Krishna and use what's ever there. I mean, I see devotees who have undergone great physical challenges in their life and who are unaffected by it. They don't have a victim mentality, and they also don't even consider it. They just rise to the occasion and they keep going. So on all levels, we go on doing our duty no matter what happens, and we leave the result to Krishna. It's not up to us. All we have to do is attend to being sincere and doing the best we can in each circumstance. As I've mentioned many times in the class, because I think it's really funny, Prabhupada says that Krishna didn't tell Arjuna that you sit down on the chariot and smoke ganja and I'll go off and fight the Kurukshetra war. He told him what to do, and he said, don't be detached. In fact, that's what he's saying right here. Just do your job, but don't be attached to the result. But do the best you can. And that's what Arjuna did. Thank you. Another question. Try to bring out something from the verse.
So, while reading, while we read the purport, so Prabhupada says that, we don't have, devotees will not have time to possess material like possessions and all. And even it looks like, Krishna is saying that we should not, like the sense of proprietorship or like lording over like material. I mean, that sense is coming. So I'm understanding everything, but I know after knowing all this also that it doesn't work on me always, I do feel I own this, or if I'm doing a work, I sometimes think I've done very well. It's me who's doing. And I do feel ownership on some things. It's mine. Even on the body, like I want to possess maybe better clothes, or all these things are there. Though I understand it's not correct. Even when I'm doing, I realize I'm not doing the right thing, but I do it.
So how does it work out for you?
I just want to, and I really want to correct myself, but not able to do it so many times. I fail miserably.
Well, so many times, you do it sometimes. It's a practice. And, maranam before smaranam, when we're going through this lifetime, we'll have plenty of opportunity to deal with reversals. You get the thing you want, then you're going to lose it. Things change all the time. And there are ways in which we may be insulted or we may be disappointed. There's plenty of opportunity for that. And we have to practice taking shelter of Krishna whenever that happens, and realizing that these kinds of reversals and disappointments and so forth really relate only to the superfluous mental body, psychological body that I've been carrying with me, and the physical body, which is bound to be burned or eaten by worms or something like that in the end. So we have to practice being dhira, or undisturbed by the material nature. This is one of the predominant teachings of Krishna throughout the Bhagavad Gita. He says, practice being undisturbed. Practice it. And see how it feels. You've mentioned that you've tried the other way, practice being attached to things. It's a practice. People learn how to do that. It's like, be attached to your country, be attached to this, be attached to that, and see how it works out for you. It doesn't really work out well, because everything's always moving. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nate shuramate buddha. So that a person who learns the ways of not being attached to the material nature, which has a beginning and an end, is an intelligent person. You can develop your intelligence. There's another verse. Where's the shloka? Look up in the 11th canto, where Krishna says there's 4 kinds of evidence. Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam, through which you should see the world and understand how it's temporary. So he says Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam, anamanam, chadushpanam. So he says use these four kinds of evidence. What is that? Shruti. Go through in here from the Srimad Bhagavatam and all the Bhagavad Gita. As Gajendra, the elephant, says, I can't figure it out, but I'm going to take the higher authority who says this material world is a temporary place, and therefore I'm not going to be attached to it. So Shruti Pratyaksham, direct experience. You can look and see for yourself that things don't work out. You can't hold on to anything. It's going to be taken away from you anyway, therefore it's not really yours. Aityam means traditional wisdom, and Anuman means logic. Do you have it? Okay, go ahead. You can say it.
Shruti Prit.
Where's it from?
It's from Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 19th chapter, 17th verse.
Okay. Now, you know, when you recite this, you're going to have to give a discourse too. Go ahead.
Shruti pratyaksham aitiyam anumanam chatushtayam pramaneshvanavastanan vikalpatsa virajyate. A translation. From the four types of evidence, Vedic knowledge, direct experience, traditional wisdom, and logical induction, one can understand the temporary, insubstantial situation of the material world, by which one becomes detached from the duality of this world.
See? You can figure it out, and then you can practice it. And when you do, then you become unaffected. That's an attitude change. You just have it. You can upgrade your attitude if you'd like. That takes practice, because the attitude sometimes will tend to revert back because of association and by the power of the modes of material nature. But if you practice and you stay in good association, you can strengthen your attitude. And really your attitude will be the determinant of how you perceive the world and how you interact with it. So if you see through these four kinds of evidence, Vedic knowledge, direct experience, traditional wisdom, and logic induction, that the world's temporary, insubstantial. There's no substance here. You didn't really get anything by holding on to the things you thought you needed here in this world. And that's how you become detached from the duality of this world. Okay, now you can expound. Give at least one other piece of evidence from another Shastra among the Pandit circle here that talks about either developing this kind of vision or the insubstantial nature of the material world or anything else that you can see relates. Discuss amongst yourselves. Have a conference and we'll come back to you. Come up with something. So, this is the advice. This is why Krishna gives us advice. And you'll find that even when you make little victories, as you're already doing, you said sometimes. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you practice it and make it an all-encompassing way of life, that you do your duty and everything that you're meant to do, but don't be attached to the results. Then you'll see that it's a superior way of living and a superior way of interacting with, a more realistic way of relating to the world. It's very realistic. Okay, another question. Yes.
I don't know how this might relate with this one. So in the purport for the previous verse you had, and it was Bhagavad Gita 4.9 was quoted, Janma karam cha me devyam evam yo vetti tattvata. So what does it mean to understand the transcendental nature? Are they talking about direct experience, or what does it mean?
Let me read you that purport, because it's a profound purport in 4.9, and it's a very important piece of information. Here, Krishna says in 4.9, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. The Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. Now the 6th verse will refer to that. Krishna says, that although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So this is going towards understanding Krishna's nature and how he's unaffected by the material world. He's not forced to take birth here. He has a transcendental body, and he's always the master of the material energy in all circumstances. Okay, so one who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting this present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and many, many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita 533, it is stated that the Lord has many, many forms and incarnations, Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers. As stated in the Vedas, the Purusha Bodhini Upanishad Eko Devo Nitya Lila Nurakto Bhaktya Vyapi Hrijantaratma. The one Supreme Personality of God is eternally engaged in many, many transcendental forms and relationships with his unalloyed devotees. This Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authority of the Vedas and of the Supreme Personality of God, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting this truth on faith, one can, without a doubt, attain liberation. The Vedic version, Tattvamasi, is actually applied in this case. Anyone who understands Lord Krishna to be the Supreme, or who says unto the Lord, "You are the same Supreme Brahman, the Personality of Godhead," is certainly liberated instantly. When? And consequently, his entrance into the transcendental association of the Lord is guaranteed. In other words, such a faithful devotee of the Lord attains perfection, and this is confirmed by the following Vedic assertion: Tam eva viditvati mrityum eti nanya panta vidyate yanaya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there is no other way to achieve this perfection. Shweta Shvataru Upanishad 3.8. That there is no alternative means that anyone who does not understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is surely in the mode of ignorance, and consequently he will not attain salvation, simply, so to speak, by licking the outer surface of the bottle of honey, or by interpreting the Bhagavad Gita according to mundane scholarship. Such empiric philosophers may assume very important roles in the material world, but they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. Such puffed up mundane scholars have to wait for the causeless mercy of the Lord. One should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, and in this way attain perfection. So if you cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, you'll attain perfection. By doing devotional service, you'll actually come to realize Krishna. Just like Jambavan. You'll notice that Jambavan had a unique way of doing service for Krishna. Do you remember? The Shamantaka jewel had been stolen. And there was a rumor going around that Krishna is the one who took it. And so Krishna, in order to dispel people's illusion about this rumor, went out on a little investigation, like, one of those mystery shows, to find out what happened. Because the the brother of I'm sorry? No, say his name so I can hear it. Satyajit, Prasenna, had taken the jewel out for a joyride. He was out riding on his horse. He got killed by a lion. And the lion took the jewel and into a cave. And then Jambavan killed the lion and took the jewel away and gave it to his son. So now Krishna went out and he found that Prasenna had been killed. And then he noticed it was from the lion because he did a little forensic work. And then he traced it to the cave, and all the people there followed Krishna, and then he went into the cave, and he didn't come back. So they got really depressed because they thought he had been killed. So Krishna, when he went in the cave, he found Jambavan's son playing with the Shamataka jewel. And he was standing over him, so the kid started to cry. So then the nursemaid raised the alarm, and Jambavan came out and didn't know that it was his Lord and Master. He's been there since the time of Ramachandra. So he started fighting with Krishna, and they fought for 30 days. You know, the heaviest MMA kind of, you know, flying kicks and everything that you can imagine. And I mean, usually those guys fight for 5-minute rounds or something like that. They fought for 30 days without stopping. And that's when Jambavan started realizing, this is my Lord. Because he said, I'm the strongest person on the planet, in the universe practically, and I can't make any headway with this person. Then it came into his mind that this is Krishna. And then he surrendered. Nice devotional service, right? If you can get it, a fight with Krishna. So you see, it's a simple thing. Jambavan is not, in a human body even. And you find the question Prahlad Maharaj raised was, I come from a demoniac family. After all, my father is Hiranyakashipu. How am I going to offer proper prayers? And then he remembered Gajendra. And he said Gajendra was an elephant, but he was sincere. So he was actually able to please the Lord. You got something over here, I can tell. Let's hear it.
Hare Krishna. Can you go back to the verse 11th canto? Yeah. So, towards the end of this verse, it describes one can understand the temporary, insubstantial situation of the material world, and that reminded me, and Makarvan the Prabhu also helped. He reminded me of the verse Vair Anilam Amritam Atidam Bashmantam Shariram Om Krito Smara Kritam Smara Krito Smara Kritam Smara. So that reinforces the same point. It says, let this temporary body be burnt to ashes, and let the air of life be merged with the totality of air. So that also conveys the same message that this body is temporary. And another thing I saw was the second evidence that it says in the verse, direct experience, also reminded me of the verse from Divinity and Divine Service, Nashtaprayeshvu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So in that verse it describes by rendering service unto the pure devotee and regularly attending classes on Srimad Bhagavatam. So I feel like for us that is the most direct experience we can get, in these
through
ways.
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Good job. Yeah, when you're saying this verse that you just quoted so nicely from the Sri Upanishad, well done. Vayura nilam amritam. Let this temporary body be merged. That this with the totality of material elements. Let the air be merged. When you're thinking like that, it's really hard to get attached to the material world. Of course, if we think like that all the time, we'll really be on the edge. But we should have, Prabhupada said once that a transcendentalist means one who's aware that I could leave at any time. I could leave this world at any time. And a materialist thinks I will live forever. And you can look inside yourself and see how are you interacting with the world, and what is your interpretation of the world, and are you thinking in that way? Are you planning for staying here forever? Over time, this verse points out the verse from the 4 types of evidence, Shruti. You see, if you live long enough, you see people leaving their bodies. Like there's a lot of devotees leaving their bodies now, and I saw both my parents leave. It leaves an impression on the mind, a little samskar there. That wow, because I remember when my father left first, and then my mother, she still had the house, and she left from her house, and when she left, I was thinking, it just came through my mind that she left all her stuff, and they had a lot of stuff, and I was thinking she just left it all behind, and think how it was never hers. Just interacted with it, looked at it, and they had so many books and other kinds of things, art, and all you can do is look at it. It's not really yours. You can look at it, you can touch it, but you can't really even attend to all of it. There's very little that we can do to enjoy the material world anyway. Thank you very much. It was very helpful. Yes. But be ready, because we're going to call on you all again.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for bringing the original verse 421. I observed there was a sequence going from high to low, perfectly controlled. That was number one. If a man is perfectly controlled, then they're not falsely thinking or in possession of any material object. If that, they're immune to any sinful reaction. And if that, they don't think they are a proprietor of any possessions. And because all of us are living in that lowest zone, or at least myself, and so we are attached to results, or we are thinking we are still servant of our senses, because I'm thinking, some part of me is still thinking that I'm a proprietor of my own possessions. That is why I'm immune to reactions, and that is why I'm not perfectly controlled. So that verse in itself was an answer to a lot of questions. Beautiful verse. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad you got something from it. Thank you. Yes, Ananta.
Previously, there was something that was it was in the previous chapter that.
But the Gita verse that we started.
Yeah, it was about being detached from the results or unattached to the results of your work.
Okay.
I've heard somewhere, it might even be somewhere in one of the Bhagavad Gita chapters, that there's like a percentage of your income you should give to the temple or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Can you remind me what that is? Because I mean, everybody's financial
50%.
situation is different. The thing is, some people don't.
16th chapter of the Gita. Prabhupada said it in many places. He was basing it on the model of Srila Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. They were billionaires, and when they decided that they wanted to join Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they divided up their wealth in what Prabhupada says is an exemplary manner. They gave 50% of it to ISV for book distribution. And I do recommend that if you don't have a revocable living trust, if you have a family, you should get with an estate attorney. And don't wait, because you don't know anything can happen. If your will goes to probate, basically most of it gets spent on a probate attorney, and you lose huge percentage of whatever you've worked hard for. Most people leave money to their relatives or whatever, but if you're going to leave a percentage to Krishna, you can get a revocable living trust and through an estate attorney, and then it makes it seamless when you pass that. And then within the revocable living trust, you'll have a will where you can designate where you want everything to go, including all your money and your assets and things like that. And it's actually a clean way to leave the world. I noticed back in the 80s when I spent a lot of time in South India that a lot of sadhus had like a gold chain or a jewel around their neck. And I said, how come everyone has that? And someone told me that it's a tradition because when sadhus are wandering here and there, if they happen to die in a foreign place, they leave some wealth behind, so there's no karma for the person who has to do their last rites. When any human being leaves the world, it's a big deal, no matter who they are. There's tons of paperwork to do, all kinds of things to figure out. Don't leave a mess behind you when you leave this corporeal body. Make sure that it's all worked out, all your stuff is lined up, and there's no legal hassles. Now, what question was I answering? I got really sidetracked there. Yeah, so Prabhupada says, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, they gave 50% of their income to the Krishna consciousness movement, to spread Krishna consciousness. And then they gave 25% to their family members for maintenance, and they kept 25% away for emergencies. And we can see Sanatan used that 25% to get out of jail, because the Qazi put him in jail because he wouldn't come back and do his government job. So the Qazi said, he called in sick. He said, I can't come in, I'm sick. So the Nawab sent the doctor, the royal physician, and he came to Sanatan's house, and he saw that Rupa and Sanatan had 20 or so Brahmins in there, and they were reading Bhagavatam all day. And so then the Nawab came there and he said, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? And he said, yeah, I'm not sick, but I'm sick of working for you, because I don't like your work. You're an enemy to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Please go ahead.
So we don't know the future. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen a week, 1 year from now. So is it best for one to just donate a portion of their income to the temple, or to somewhere that's going to support the devotees or something like that, and without worry, without fear of the future, and just know that just try to be regulated in spiritual life, and not worry about the future.
Yes.
Not worry about money, because we live in Silicon Valley.
Well, if you're working and you give some of the results of your work to spread Krishna consciousness, this is something Krishna recommends actually in the Gita, 12th chapter, then there's a way in which, by giving away some of the fruit of your results to Krishna, your work will seem like it will be empowered. And you'll also notice something very profound, and this comes out in the stories in the Bhagavatam, especially of Bali Maharaj, you'll notice, and then also there's Dadichi and others. And these stories remind us of the principle of what's called preemptive giving. And that is, give it away to Krishna before the material nature comes and steals it away from you. Because if you keep money around, then, and you can keep some around if you have to maintain yourself, but you should know that one way or another it will be taken, or you'll be separated from somehow or other. So if you can give it away, like Bali Maharaj, he asked this, his guru, so-called guru, was Shukracharya. He rejected his guru, actually, because Vamanadev came to Bali Maharaj because Bali had taken over the universe, and it was being held by him on behalf of the demons, and Krishna wanted it back. So he came as Vamadev. Vamadev was a tiny little brahmachari, one of the most attractive features of Krishna, so effulgent and kind of cute. He has, a little deer skin and a little begging pot and stick. And he came into the assembly of Bali Maharaj when Bali was performing a huge sacrifice. And these karmakanda sacrifices were meant to create even more wealth and become more fixed in the material world. But when he saw when Bali saw Vamadev, he became inextricably attracted. And he was just thinking, I should give my heart, I should give everything to this personality, whoever it is. So then he did Vamana as a beggar, and he asked for charity. It was a certain time of the sacrifice when a brahmachari could ask charity from the king who was performing the sacrifice. So then he asked, and Bali said, ask whatever you want. I'll give you anything. I'll give you the whole world. But Vamana said, I only want 3 paces of land. And Bali said, but your feet, as beautiful as they are, they're tiny. I mean, how much are you going to get? This is not what you ask from an emperor. You ask for something big. And Vamana said, well, if I asked for 3 islands, meaning 3 planets, and my heart isn't satisfied through service, then I wouldn't be satisfied with that. I'd want more and more and more and more, and then there's no end to it. So he said, I just want the 3 paces of land. That's all I'm asking for. Of course, he cheated him, because he's Vishnu. And Vishnu is known as Hari, one who takes away all one's burdensome material connections and possessions. And so now Bali Maharaj says, yes, I'll do it. I'll give you. And then Shukracharya, who's his guru, said, don't do it, Bali. He said, this Vamana is not a Brahmana. He's the greatest cheater, Lord Vishnu. And so he said, the thing is, you have to maintain yourself. And you have to keep this. And how are you going to maintain your family? And the acharyas point out, he was thinking, and how am I going to get paid? Because he was a family priest, and he's like, I'm living off this guy, and if he gives it all away to Vishnu, what am I supposed to do? And so he presented this conundrum to Bali, but Bali said, I already promised, for one thing, and nobody in my family has ever taken back a promise. And second of all, if this really is Vishnu, because Shukracharya is saying it's not what you think it is, and if it's Vishnu, then I probably should give him everything. It's an opportunity. How often do you get an opportunity to give it directly to God? So he went ahead with the contract, which was to pour water from his water pot and say Om, because it was Shukracharya who pointed out that, you haven't signed the contract, because a Vedic contract back then, you had to say Om, and you had to pour water from your water pot. And then it was like you signed it, DocuSign. And it's finished, locked up. So then he went ahead and did that, and Shukracharya cursed him. He said, you're a fool, and you're not my disciple. I reject you. You're going to lose everything. Saw that coming. So then, of course, Vamanadev, his first footstep, he covered the whole world. He expanded himself. Krishna does that. You give him a little opening in your life, and next thing he starts to take over. And then his next footstep, he expanded all the way through the whole universe, and his lotus foot went so high that it punctured a hole through the covering of the universe, which just takes some doing. And the water from the Viraja started to pour through. That's the Ganges. It came through. So then he said, so now give me my third footstep, because you promised me 3. I already took 2, but everything was already taken. And in his expansion, it was like the universal form. Everything was Bali could see everything was included within Vamadev. There wasn't one thing that wasn't inside him or covered by his 2 footsteps. So he said, now give me my 3rd, you cheater. You promised me 3. Where's my 3rd? So then he tied up Bali Maharaj with the ropes of Varuna. Actually, Garuda helped him. And then he threw him in a cave. And from there, even Prahlad Maharaj came to see what happened. That's his great-grandfather. And it's mentioned there that Vamadev knew what was in the heart of Bali Maharaj, that he intended to give him everything. And therefore, he helped him out a little bit. And because he knew his tendency to surrender. Krishna is known as Bhavagrahi Janardana. He knows the intention, what's the intention to surrender. So the point that Bali Maharaj made was, look, I'm going to lose all this anyway. So I might as well give it to Vishnu. And it was the same thing to Dadichi. Dadichi was a great sage. And here's how great he was. First of all, he had been fortified, his whole body was fortified by the Narayana Kavacha. There's these mantras you can say, they're right there in the Bhagavatam. But we can just chant Hare Krishna. They're mantras, and they give you a shield, a Narayana shield, Narayana Kavacha. So his body had been so fortified by that. When the demigods were in trouble, they went to Vishnu, and Vishnu said, as actually Indra, Vritrasura had appeared, and the demigods said, we're finished, there's no way we can defeat him. So what do we do? And Vishnu directed him to go to Dadichi, otherwise known as Dadancha, and you ask him for his bones as a donation. Anybody ever ask you for your bones? It sounds pretty good, just giving some of your income now, right? So they went to Dadichi, and he warned him, he said, Dadichi, he's very much fixed in self-realization, so at first he will say no, because he wants to hear you tell him why he should do it. He wants to hear Atma Tattva Gyan. He likes to hear that. And then he'll give you. So they go to Brahma and all the demigods to Dadichi, and they said, great sage, we're asking some charity. He said, what can I give you? He said, we need your bones only. He said, my bones, but I need this body to survive. This is where I live, in this body. And they said, but you're not your body anyway. And they started telling him that the body's temporary, it'll go away. And he goes, yes, I know all that. I'd be happy to give my bones. And so he gave his bones in charity. And from the bones, they created the thunderbolt that Indra was able to kill Vritrasura with. But in the process, you'll hear many verses from Dadichi in which he says that if you have the opportunity to give what you have now, because it's only just temporarily within your control, just very temporarily, if you have the opportunity to give it to Vishnu before it's taken away from you by the material nature, then you're the smartest person and you get the greatest benefit. So you should look for those opportunities. So Krishna recommends this kind of activity for anybody who's working in the world. You can't suddenly just give up everything and walk away generally. It takes a lot of practice. You just start when you're young and you can join an ashram and feel what it's like to have nothing. It's actually really nice. I joined the ashram, and I just remember, we slept on the floor, really on the floor. And I didn't even have any clothes. I didn't even have any underwear. Everything was communal. Whatever you had, you give to the person to wash it, and they take it out and wash it. Some people did a better job than others as far as folding it goes, because brahmacharis will be brahmacharis. And they bring it back and put it in a bin, and then you just go pull out of the bin and wear whatever you could get. And we didn't have a care in the world, and we didn't have money and everything like that. But you learn from that, it says, the Bhagavatam is this kind of a lifestyle that, what do you need? What do you really need, actually? And if you have a little prasadam, a place to lie down, to rest, and some service, then you're happy. And everything else is naturally there. Otherwise, you have to toil really hard to maintain all kinds of things. So that's a kind of practice. The fact that the brahmachari is supposed to go out and collect alms all day and then come back and give it to the guru and say, okay, you take it, and the brahmachari doesn't keep anything. Not even like, I needed $5 to get some dental floss. You don't even keep that. You hand it all in, and if you want dental floss, you go tell the treasurer, like, I need some dental floss. We'll get it for you at Kmart. And you learn to live with basic needs. So in the varnashrama, there's a way in which there's training early on so that you understand, you have that basis, and then when one enters into the grihastha ashram, one doesn't have this sense of proprietorship over everything. One already has that base that one's built. But from that position, one can also give away some of the fruits of one's work and see what it feels like when you give away what you worked hard for. It's counterintuitive, but you actually grow. You feel bigger. And when you try to hold on to everything, then you become contracted. Your consciousness becomes contracted. You try to hold on to it. And it's a phenomena, but no matter how much you get, it's not enough. Have you ever noticed that? You've all noticed it, right? Because in your mind, you can just spend it all, right? It's like, I want this, this, and that. Everything's got to be better. But if you take the opposite track and just say, whatever I need for my service, I'll keep that. Whatever comes of its own accord. Yet drishya labhe santushto, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, learn to be satisfied with gain when it comes of its own accord. What a long answer to a simple question. The answer is yes. Whatever work we do, we should give away some of the result of our work to help spread Krishna consciousness. And when you do that, you'll feel naturally a connection to Krishna. As we often say, if you put some of your money in the hundi, when you go home at night, your mind will still be hovering there. It's like, what'd you put all that in the hundi for? And your mind will be hanging around the altar. Yes, go ahead. Another question from Shraddha, from online. Ananta, was that helpful? Okay.
This is from Dinanath Nitai Das.
Dinanath Nitai. I think he's in Gita Nagari.
Oh, these days? Okay.
I saw him with a cow
Okay.
recently in a picture.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. You have mentioned that we should purify our senses in order to be able to get dictation from Krishna. Please excuse me if I did not get it right. My question is, how do we know that we are purified enough to get dictation from Krishna, and how do we balance this with always checking in with the Guru?
Well, just that, we can become purified enough to take dictation from Krishna. This is called Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi Yoga means that Krishna is informing you of what to do, and this is a natural result of serving Krishna. As he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Let's look at that verse. It's such an essential verse. For those who are keeping score, it's easy to remember. It's 10:10. What verse is it? 10. From the Bhagavad Gita. So you can really rely on this verse. Tesham satata yuktanam. So satata yuktana means one who's always engaged in devotional service, right? They're connected. Satatam. That person, tesham. Bhajatam means what? Yeah, bhajatam. You're performing bhajan. You're worshiping Krishna. It comes from the root word bhaj, to worship Krishna. And priti purvakam, which means with love. So you're worshiping Krishna with love always. Then dadami buddhi yogam tam. So dadami means that I'm giving something, right? And what's Krishna giving? Buddhi yogam tam. He's giving them the intelligence, yena mam upayanti te, how to come to me. He's informing the person how to come to me. Look at the translation now. Those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Now, you'll find in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of the Avadhuta Brahmana. So Maharaj Yadu is going through the forest, and he meets this enlightened sage, this Brahmana, who's an Avadhuta. Avadhuta means he's not connected to anything in the world. And he is impressed with the sage and makes a conversation with him, and in the course of the conversation he asks, how did you become so enlightened? And the Avadhuta Brahmana says, I have my 24 gurus. And Maharaj Yadu said, excuse me, but I don't see anybody here. You're all by yourself and you live in the wilderness. And he says, no, I'll point them out to you one after another. So he starts off by pointing to the mountain. He said, from the mountain I've learned tolerance, because although it's pounded by the storms and lightning hits it, the mountain stays still and It still gives clear water and minerals and all kinds of other riches to everybody all around. And it doesn't mind all the various ways in which it's provoked by the environment. And then he talks about the tree, and he talks about the water, he talks about the Karari hawk, one of my favorites. One day when he's sitting, he watches a Karari hawk taking off into the sky with a mouse, and then two bigger hawks assail the smaller Karari hawk, and they say that you give it up or you die. And so he just drops it. And that's where we got the mantra, drop the mouse. If you're holding on to it, just drop it. Drop the mouse. And he saw that the small Karari hawk just flew away free. He could have fought over it and died. They would have pecked his eyes out and taken the mouse anyway. But why fight over it? So in this way, he went through his 24 gurus, and he pointed out the lesson he learned from each one of them. And this is actually Lord Krishna telling this story to Uddhava. And one of the conclusions of the story is that when one becomes purified through devotional service, then one's mind becomes one of one's shiksha gurus. Your very mind and intelligence begins to inform you properly when it's purified. Now, of course, your question is, how do you know whether you're not just delusional and you start to think you're the next avatar or something like that? And that is, first of all, you should remain humble, because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, amanitvam adamvitvam, the two first principles of knowledge are humility and pridelessness. And if you start to think that you're the all in all, then you're going the wrong direction. You should become more humble as you become more wise. And similarly, the admonition is that one should always triangulate with knowledge. That is, verify one's realization. If you have some thought or realization, you should be under guidance from Guru and Sadhu and Shastra. So that means that line yourself up so that you're getting good advice, although obviously you're going to get inspiration and you're going to get some insight in what to do, and you're going to notice actually that it's coming from Super Soul. You will notice it. Nonetheless, you should still corroborate what kind of information you're getting with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And in that way, you'll remain on the divine path without being diverted. I hope that helps. Ananta Prabhu.
Isn't Guru Sadhu? Or
is the Guru Sadhu? Yes. But the way it's expressed is you have a local person, a person who has very good connection with you, who you're very specifically getting information and help from as your guru. And then there's the sadhus that you can observe for yourself and see how do they do things. This is a good question to ask yourself. If you find yourself a few fine sadhus in the world that you admire, and you observe how they do things, and then when you're about to do something, you can ask yourself, what would such and such do in a case like this? This is a really good technique for keeping yourself on the straight path. Ask yourself, would such and such do this right now? And then you go, nah, I don't think so. I'll drop the mouse and walk away. Another question? Okay, we'll take a 3-minute break, and we'll see you right back here at when the big hand hits the 4. That's in 4 minutes. Hare Krishna. Now, don't go away, everyone online. We'll be right back. Take a 4-minute break.
Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'm doing it intentionally. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama.
This break has been brought to you by the Prabhupada Marathon, which is started in various places around the world. We encourage everyone to take advantage of this time of year when people are open to the idea that it's better to give than to receive, and from our part to give them the great treasure of Krishna consciousness, especially in the form of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the greatest kind of charity that one can give to others. And it's helpful for the planet in many different ways. One of the ways is that when people become aware of their spiritual nature, they become more attuned to the laws of nature and become better stewards of the earth, and start taking care of animals and plants and trees in a much more responsible manner. Okay, another question came from online. Is everyone okay? How was your break? Was it good? Oh, good.
So Maharaj, this is Bhakta Sumit.
Oh,
Sumit Arora.
how nice.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. The question is, how do you overcome becoming a reason for hurting a devotee inadvertently?
How do you
overcome becoming a reason for hurting a devotee inadvertently?
Inadvertently?
Yeah.
Well, we have to be careful. It's important to be careful. Because, if it's inadvertent, then what can you do? But we should definitely treat everyone with respect, not just devotees, but everybody. A devotee should see that actually Krishna is within everyone's heart. In fact, Krishna says this, if you want to grab the 11th canto, and the section called Bhakti Yoga. That'll take you a while to find. That's a long section. Krishna tells about what is the practice of bhakti yoga. And therein he says that one of the main practices of bhakti is to show respect to all the other living entities. Because Krishna is there within the heart, and the divine spark of Krishna, the soul, is there within the heart. And you can look it up, devotional service, bhakti yoga. Give her a buy. Get her a book stand. And there Krishna says that this is the nature of the devotees, is to show respect to others. Who knows another shastra that recommends this? What is that? Shri Upanishad? Upadeshamrita? Yeah. Yes? Chaitanya. Okay, so in many places. There are obviously many shastras. I'm thinking of Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Vanupashati Sarva Bhuteshu Chatmanam Tatona Vijugupta. Verses 6 and 7 in the Sri Upanishad. Why don't you look at them? Uh-oh, we lost our controller on the... we got him back. So in these verses, Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Vanupashyati. Anupashyati means to see, and anu means to follow. So you should follow in the footsteps of the Shastra, the great sages. Rather follow the instruction of the Shastra. Let's look at the word for word you'll see here. Ya tu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Eva Anupashyati, one who observes in a systematic way. So you should systematically see how all living entities are spiritual souls. Don't be envious of others. In fact, we read when we were in Govardhan, Prabhupada writes that there's no need for a devotee to become envious of another devotee. Don't become envious of another devotee's success in preaching. No need. Just have your own relationship with Krishna and it'll be satisfactory. But you should do it systematically. Observe in a systematic way that every living being is a part of God, and also that God is there within the heart, the super soul's there. Vijagupsade, then you'll never hate anyone. Offenses come up when you start to develop malice. Have you ever noticed if you are envious of somebody and then you interact with them, that could cause some problem? One person. Okay, or even more so, I've noticed it's very subtle, but if you're writing to somebody and you feel really annoyed with them or something, angry, and you're writing, it comes out in your writing. It comes out. So be careful when you're dealing with others, and especially when you're dealing with devotees. If you look there's a profound verses about this in the story of Maharaj Ambarish. Maharaj Ambarish was such a great devotee. His glories are unlimited. He was so tolerant. He was a king also, and he had great wealth. But he engaged it all in Krishna's service, and 24 hours a day he was always engaged in some kind of service to the Supreme Lord. He used his hands to clean the temple of the Lord. He used his eyes to see the deity of the Lord. He used his ears for what? Hearing what? Like what? Like what in Srimad Bhagavatam? Like what in Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita? Stories about Krishna? Okay. And he used his legs walking to the temple of the Lord. So he was engaged in fasting, and he met Durvasa Muni. Durvasa Muni, there's stories about him in every yuga, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Kali Yuga. There's stories of Durvasa Muni. A lot of them have to do with his eating power, because he really likes to eat. He can eat a lot. He's an empowered sage, actually. But when he came to Ambarish Maharaj, Maharaj Ambarish offered him a royal reception and said, I'll feed you. And then Durvasa Muni said, yeah, just a minute, we have to go take bath. He takes with him his tens of thousands of disciples wherever he goes. So it's a little bit of a trouble when he comes to your house, because you have to feed him and all his disciples. So they went off to take bath. He came back. Ambarish Maharaj was in a conundrum because he had been fasting on the Ekadashi, and there's a certain time and he had to break the Ekadashi. So now, if he didn't break the Ekadashi, then the Ekadashi would be ruined. And if he did break it, then it would be a so-called offense according to the Varnashram, because there was this sadhu, and here he is, Grihastha Kshatriya, and there was a Brahmana sadhu, sannyasi. So he thought, well, either way, it's troublesome. So he consulted with his other Brahmins, and he came up with the idea that in the Shastra, taking a little water doesn't break the fast, but at the same time it does. So he took a little water to break the fast. Technically he's broken. And when Durvasa came back, he's a mystic, so he came back and said, wait a minute, you broke the fast, you ate before me. And so he created this big monster to destroy Ambarish Maharaj. Don't do that. And the monster then was annihilated by the Sudarshan Chakra. Because as Krishna reveals in this chapter, the Sudarshan Chakra is always protecting the devotees. Did you know that Sudarshan Chakra is following you around, protecting you? Did you know? It's right there in the Bhagavatam. And so then the Sudarshan Chakra started chasing Durvasa Muni, and he went to everyone in the whole universe, to Brahma, Lord Shiva, finally went to Vishnu, and Vishnu said, even I can't help you. You offended my devotee. There's no one more dear to me than my devotees. So Durvasa went back and took shelter of Ambarish, and Ambarish forgave him. And he prayed to the Sudarshan Chakra, please spare his life. And then finally Sudarshan left him alone. And Durvasa learned a great lesson. There are a plethora of verses there which describe the glories of the Vaishnavas and how you should be careful not to offend them. So if you only do one thing in your devotional service, anything else you do, you just come and take prasadam. That's all. But the main practice you have in your life is to not offend devotees. You go out of your way not to offend devotees. You'll be successful. It's so important. So see all living entities as worshipable because Krishna is there within the heart with the speaker devotees. Yes, Srivas Pandit Prabhu. 11, 29, 16. What is that? Did we get there? 11, 29, 16. What are you guys cooking up over here? Okay, here it is. Whatever it is, Srivas Pandit Prabhu said it, so it's going to be good. Visrija smayamanam swan drisham vridam cha daihikim pranema dandavad bhumav ashwa chandala go karam. Disregarding the ridicule of one's companions, one should give up the bodily conception and its accompanying embarrassment. One should offer obeisances before... Is that what you found? Okay. One should offer obeisances before all, even the dogs, outcasts, cows, and asses, falling flat upon the ground like a rod. This is Lord Krishna's instructions in Bhakti Yoga. This is how to practice bhakti, is offer respects to all living entities. Of course, Prabhupada warns in the Ishopanishad, don't do this artificially and pretend that you're an Uttama Adhikari. That's why it says Anupashyati. You should systematically understand it from the Shastra. Don't pretend that you're unnaturally, if you're on that level, no problem. But if you're not, then don't imitate the Uttama Adhikari. And so this is one of the tenets of bhakti. Trinadapi sunichena. Be very, very humble. And I submit to you, Sumit Prabhu, that if you maintain this, as I know you do, then it's very difficult to offend devotees. And even if you do, the misunderstanding can be overcome because of your humility. Yes?
When we had when we read about Kanishta Adhikari, I don't remember the verse, but it says, even if a person, he goes to a temple and worships the Lord, but if he is not respectable to others and even to the devotees, then he's on a Kanishta
Yes.
platform.
This verse 11 canto says, Acharyam eva hariye pujam yasharaye hite na tad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smritaha. So this is describing the entry-level devotee called the prakrita bhakta. Practically, he's materially attached, but the definition given in this verse, Acharyam eva hariye pujam yashraye hite. The person sees that Krishna is in the temple, but disregards not nishu bhakteshu. He doesn't or she doesn't know how to respect devotees. Not tad bhakteshu cha anyeshu, and all other living entities as well. The person doesn't know how to do good for others. This is how Prabhupada puts it. When he speaks on this verse, he says, the person only sees God in the temple, but he doesn't recognize the devotees. Doesn't know how to properly treat the devotees, which Shraddha brought up earlier. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta. Which verse number is that? It's verse 5 from the Upadeshamrita, and it gives the description of how you should carefully honor all the devotees. So a prakrita bhakti doesn't know how to honor devotees. Cha anyeshu, and also doesn't know how to do good for others. Doesn't even think of it. Only thinks of my worship, but doesn't think of how to distribute Krishna consciousness so other people get the benefit. Whereas a madhyamadikari, the person on the next level, the middle level, is always thinking, Ishvare taradineshu balisheshu dvisatsucha prema maitri kripopeksha yakroti samadhyamaha. The madhyam, middle devotee, is always thinking of how to give mercy to the innocent people. And he or she also knows how to avoid the envious people, knows how to worship Krishna, and also makes appropriate friendships with the devotees. Yes?
So Maharaj, when people do things inadvertently,
They do what?
when they do it inadvertently, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Irreverent?
Inadvertently.
Evidently?
Advertently.
Inadvertently.
Advertently.
Okay.
Advertently, yeah. So do things really happen, like for everything there's a cause. So when a person is doing, disrespecting somebody, like, beyond his control or something like that, is there something subtle going on inside?
Probably. Probably.
It's like I didn't have an intention.
I mean, if I'm not really adjusted properly, I could unknowingly, inadvertently go around and offend a bunch of people just because of the way I move in the world. I'm unconsciously incompetent. I mean, we see this is mentioned in the Madhurya Kadambini that oftentimes when somebody joins Krishna consciousness and then they think they know everything right away. Yeah, I'm a pure devotee, I know everything. This is called Utsahan Mayi. Utsahan means, as you know, enthusiasm. From which verse in the Upanishad? And what does Utsahan mean? It's the first. Enthusiasm. So you should have enthusiasm in devotional service, but Utsahan Mayi means you get carried away by it and you think, hey, I'm an expert in this, I know everything. And neophytes can sometimes annoy the heck out of everybody else because, they just got there and then they know better than everybody. So that's something inadvertent due to unconscious incompetence. And the next stage is to be consciously incompetent. Then you become a little humble. It's like, wow, I really don't know anything. And then you should become consciously competent and then unconsciously competent. Prabhu, give him the microphone. Is that a Kaliya on your t-shirt? Show him how to work the mic.
There we go.
Thank you.
Earlier, you said something, and I'm going to ask a question relevant to my interpretation of it. It was about maintaining one's own mental and physical health.
Yes.
In order to aid in their devotion.
Yes.
This is something that has been very prevalent for me lately in terms of the enormity of its effect. And I was just wondering if there is more specific advice that you could elaborate on, or if there are verses that have, any guidance on this topic.
Sure. In the 8th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of Gajendra. Gajendra is an elephant. And Gajendra wasn't always an elephant. In his last life, he was a king named Indradumna. And he got cursed because he had made an offense to a sage. Actually, the offense he made was he was sitting meditating, and when this sage came to his ashram, he didn't recognize him. Not that he didn't recognize, that he didn't acknowledge him, because he was deeply in samadhi. So the sage became upset, and he cursed him. A lot of cursing going on there. And he cursed him to become a dumb elephant in this next life. So Gajendra was the result. So the king in the next life became an elephant, and he was living on a heavenly planet. So then, although he's an elephant, he was the king of all, not just the elephants, but all the animals. And he lived in a very beautiful place. And he felt a modicum of success, did Gajendra, because everyone would get out of his way when he'd come through. He had a beautiful family and so forth. And when he got to the lake, elephants like water. And so he went in the lake, and he was bathing there with his family, and he was taking some trouble, which he enjoyed, the trouble to spray his children and his wife and everything with the water. They were playing around, as people do. It's the last thing you expect for some kind of disaster to hit you, or oftentimes when we're least expecting it, some kind of disaster visits us. So a disaster visited Gajendra in that circumstance when he was taking leisure time with his family and enjoying himself, and a crocodile grabbed onto his leg and wouldn't let go. So Gajendra started fighting with the crocodile, and they fought for 100 years, but then Gajendra realized that he couldn't win. Now, there are a lot of animal matchups. You can see a lot of them in Vrindavan, like who wins, because there's all kinds of different pairs of animals there, different species of animals, and sometimes they argue with each other. So, who wins, dog or monkey? And it depends a lot of times, because dogs, they go in a pack, and then cows beat everybody, because I've seen, they just, they move people out of their way. Sometimes there's a dispute over territory and food and things like that. But it's interesting, all the matchups. So Bhagavatam brings out this point that normally elephant beats crocodile. But in the water, crocodile beats elephant, because the water is the natural habitat of the crocodile, but not of Gajendra. So that, in that section of the 8th canto, there's much made of how it's important. This is one of the lessons from Gajendra, that he wasn't strong enough to fight off the crocodile. So metaphorically, the crocodile is this oppression of the material world, the tyranny of the senses. And there's a way in which Prabhupada describes how one should have, should be strong senses, body, mind, in order to fight against Maya. As Maya is a formidable opponent. And we have to be, as Prabhupada says in that section, in our natural habitat, in our natural condition, in a natural condition of life, so that we feel strong enough to go on fighting with Maya. For instance, if someone, like I was describing the brahmacharya ashram earlier, and so let's say somebody just says, yeah, I'll just move in. And next thing you know, you're thinking about, where's my bed, and I need a car, and make it a Mustang. And there's all kinds of ideas I might have. It'd be unnatural for me. Whereas it doesn't matter where you perform bhakti. You should be in your natural condition of life. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Grihatako banetako sharahari bolegako sukhe duke bulunako varane harinam korure. He said, whether you live as a sannyasi or a grihastha, doesn't matter as long as you continue the process, keep the vibration going. So Prabhupada points out there that you should put yourself in a natural condition of life where you feel strong. Your senses are strong, you feel natural, you're not out of balance. Really, that's what the whole Varnashram is about. That's why there's different stages of life. There's brahmachari, there's grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi. These are all various ashramas, places where you can take shelter because it's your nature. You feel natural there. Like Hanumat Prishek Swami, he's a natural sannyasi. You look at him, you say, that's a sannyasi. He's detached from the world. And, he wouldn't feel comfortable. He doesn't feel comfortable living in a house. He'd rather live under a tree. And, he's simple like that. He's a brilliant scholar, but he's also, his needs are simple. So you look at him, and you see somebody else, they tried to take sannyas, they would be tortured. But it's the main point is to be in a natural state where you take care. And you should also take care of your body. He probably gave an example of that by his own life. He, of course, he had 2 heart attacks on the way to America. And then he went to the doctor. The doctor said, you have to walk every day. So what did Prabhupada do? He walked every day. Every day. Wherever he went, he did his morning walk. And he walked fast, too, because it was a health walk. And he also got 2 massages every day from one of his male disciples who would give him a very brisk massage. It's kind of like yoga where you don't have to do as much stretching. But Prabhupada was in his 70s and 80s, and he was caring for his health because you only get one body to perform your devotional service with, so you have to take care of it nicely. Does that help? Was that specific enough?
It was pretty specific. I guess I'm also curious if there are, I feel like this was more for physical health and then for mental health. I really like the idea of training to enjoy pleasure. I think that was part of the story. Does that sound right to you? Or?
Well, I mentioned earlier on in the talk about how when we perform divine austerities, then we learn to enjoy more internally and not simply depend on the emolument of the body and mind and senses and so forth. External stimuli. Krishna says this in the Gita, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta konteya na teshu ramate buddha. So this verse says, a wise person doesn't delight in the stimulating the senses with the external objects because he or she knows that those encounters have a beginning and an end. So he doesn't take a lot of pleasure in them. On the other hand, he mentions prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyeva manatushta stita pragnastadochite. Someone who's fixed in consciousness has the wherewithal to enjoy pleasure within, to see the self within the self. And once one has that kind of pleasure, actually a person who's very advanced in consciousness no longer has an interest in the external world and sees that he or she is detached from that. That's something Krishna describes also in the Bhagavad Gita. Naiva kinchit karomiti yukto manyita tatvavit pashan shinban pashan jigran ashnan gachan supan shasan pralapan vishran grinan unmishan, it'll be over in a minute, unmishan nimishan napi indriyan indriyarteshu vartanta iti dharayan. This is describing a person who's in the divine consciousness, is using his or her senses, but he's only watching them take place. He's like Shakshi, or a witness. And he knows that this is going on mechanically. I have nothing to do with these external workings of the senses interacting with their objects. Happiness from within. Yes, from the internet, and then 1, 2, and then kirtan.
So one was an observation from Radha Venkat Prabhu from Folsom.
Oh.
Yeah, this is from the earlier part. It popped up now.
Yes.
He was saying that when I see estate sale sign, let us say.
When you see what sign?
Estate, real estate for sale.
Real estate for sale sign,
like
yes.
a sign. I get a wake-up call.
Estate sale?
Real estate.
Oh,
Real estate.
estate sale,
Estate.
not real estate. Right, so an estate sale, and they left all their stuff behind. Yeah.
Yeah. I get a wake-up call.
A wake-up call.
Yes. And then I think the kids also found it. He's about the respect verse. He's quoting another pair of verse from the same chapter, 11:29.
You found something else? Let's hear it.
I think they also found the same one.
Okay.
The kids, yeah. And there's a question from Shivatsa Purana.
Srivatsa, yes. Yes.
So it's kind of along the line of Bhakta Sumit, but not exactly. So he says, sometimes when presenting Krishna consciousness, it happens that I accidentally offend someone when I have tried presenting Krishna consciousness in an authentic way. I have noticed that this usually happens when people do not understand the larger picture of things and the purpose of different practices. How do I present Krishna consciousness in an authentic way without changing the philosophy, but at the same time not offend anyone?
You have to practice. Know your audience and understand what their limits are and what their sensibilities are. And if you practice a lot, and if you hit the guardrails enough times, you start learning where the middle of the road is. And so it takes a lot of practice to do that. And all devotees are trying to do that, because teaching Krishna consciousness to others in the world is one of the main practices of Lord Chaitanya's devotees. And you'll notice that even Vyasadeva is doing that. That's what the 5th chapter of the 1st canto is about. Vedavyas is lamenting that he's not reaching his audience properly, or he's lamenting, period, and then his guru comes along and says, the reason you're lamenting is because your message is not crisp enough. It's not directed enough. So if Vyasadeva can be grappling with that problem, well, why wouldn't we? And so obviously it takes practice. And you'll notice that Prabhupada, when he came to teach Krishna consciousness in the West, was observing the audience a lot. He took a lot of time. Some of his early servants mentioned how he would always be watching the culture and seeing what it is that motivates people and how to introduce Krishna consciousness within a context that they can appreciate. As an example, here in San Francisco, there was, during the 60s and 70s, there were several very famous concert halls. One of them was called the Family Dog. And that was a concert hall in which rock and roll groups would come and play, and people would go there and take different kinds of intoxication and listen to the music and play with Dago paint and all kinds of stuff. And so, Prabhupada went there with other devotees, including Allen Ginsberg, and did a program there and chanted. That was an innovation. And how to reach the audience, one of the ways he talked about was, he told Allen Ginsberg, you should speak. Allen Ginsberg didn't know so much about the details of philosophy, but he knew the language of the culture, and he could advocate at that time. So Prabhupada adjusted many things, and he took great pains to try to connect the message with the culture, with the people of the time. So that's an important thing, and it's called, when you're able to do that, realization. There were 2 more questions. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we started the class today by talking about tapasya, and we also give a lot of importance to following the process. So one thing in Srimad Bhagavatam, when Rishabh Dev is instructing his sons, there is one thing that is not very clear, if we can talk about that in that context. He says, for further advancement, you should also give up the means. That is, you should not become attached to the process of liberation itself. So how do we understand that in our context?
Well, ultimately, from our context, the devotees aren't so attached to liberation. This is obvious in many of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. For instance, na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani janmani shvare bhavatat bhakti rahaitu twai. Basically, he's saying there, I don't want anything. Na dhanam, I don't want wealth. Na janam, I don't want followers. Na sundarim, I don't need a beautiful consort. I don't want, what else doesn't he want? I don't want liberation. I don't even want liberation or birth after birth. Janmanishvare means birth after birth, let me stay engaged in your service. So he's not asking, take me out of samsara even. So devotees ultimately aren't attached to, and there's some other meaning there too, because there's a commentary that describes that. But from you can take it from the perspective of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, that they're not concerned, they're not attached to liberation, they're just attached to serving Krishna. That's one way of looking at it. There was one more here. Okay, 1, 2. Whoever gets the microphone first, is it. Tie goes to the runner, infield fly rule.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you. My question was, how do we decipher the conflicting instructions on like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prayer that he doesn't want to take birth again? He wants to take birth again and again and be, Krishna and be engaged in Krishna's service. Whereas Kunti Maharani says, seeing Krishna means not seeing seeing you again and again means not seeing life and death again.
Well, the point is, even if a devotee does take another birth, he's not taking birth like an ordinary person. We already read the verse earlier, Janma karmacha me divyam evam yoviti tatvata tyakvadeham punar janma naiti mameti. So Arjuna, Krishna says, if you understand me and my transcendental nature, you don't take birth again in this material world. When devotees do take birth in this world, they're doing it to serve Krishna, and they're liberated. Even devotees in this life who have just taken up the process of Krishna consciousness are known, who are fully engaged as Jivan Mukta. Iha yasya harer dasya karmana manasa gira nikila apyavastastu Jivan Mukta su uchite. Look it up. And this means that if a person's fully engaged in devotional service, even in this life, even in this body, such a person is known to be liberated. Last one. And I'll show you how serious I am about it. I'm picking up the drum.
So this question is from Shivas Chandra Prabhu, and this is about disrespect. And he says that regarding not disrespecting other living entities, since we as sadhakas try to avoid prajalpa, we naturally become disinclined from unnecessary conversations. This may be seen by people as disrespectful. What would be your advice with regards to maintaining a balance in such situations?
Well, that takes practice also. I mean, if I understood the question correctly, and who's it from?
Shivas Chandra used to be in the Bhakti Center earlier.
Oh, yeah. So how not to be so absorbed in your practice when you're interacting with other people that you put them off because you're so inflexible in dealing with them? Is that the idea behind it, would you say? Well, I think that you can get a lot of practice with that if you go in book distribution. Because that's where you get the most practice in learning how to deal with all kinds of people, immediately pick up on their mood and be harmonious with them, and to be able to accommodate. And you realize that that by doing so, a lot more comes out of people. Learn to be flexible. Generally, Kanishta-adhikaris, they're inflexible, and they tend to be attached to the letter of the law, and therefore they can put people off quite well, easily. And Madhyama-adhikaris, they're more willing to venture out into the world and interact with people in ways that are more accommodating, because they're ultimately trying to give them something, and it requires opening their heart through your interaction with them before you're able to put something in the heart. And that requires a little practice, doesn't it? You're all expert at this, going out and meeting people in various places. We were in some place years ago. I was with Shraddha and some other devotees, and we went to one door, and there was a really nice Muslim couple. And the woman, you remember this? The woman came to the door, and she was kind of friendly, but the man was sitting on the couch watching television. Or was this in Toronto? It was Shama Mahini. We were in Toronto, and the guy was trying to ignore us, and his wife was following. She wanted to do it, but she was following whatever her husband said. And so we both got on our knees in front of the door. And then we really got their attention because of the culture and everything. And it was a long process. But the end of it was that the man totally changed. We listened to him and we interacted with him, even as he was watching the television and trying to ignore us. But one thing led to another, and he came over and he became altogether favorable, like it was a really happy experience at the end. But it's times like that, you remember, you innovate, you take instruction, Krishna's inspiring, try like this. And when you have those experiences again and again, you start developing a way to interact with people. I really went over time, and now we have no time left, so we'll invest it in the kirtan. Is there one last question? Yes. We need a microphone to quadrant 5.
One small realization while you were telling about book distribution. Last Saturday, we went to one Japanese home, and that lady didn't know any other language other than Japanese, and we didn't know how to convince her to take books.
You don't know about language cards.
So Shama Jagannath Prabhu, immediately he got the inspiration from her that we can use Google to translate from English to Japanese. And then she took that book happily and gave us donation.
Very nice. Yes. And
so I was asking Prabhuji, how come you know like that? So immediately Krishna gave inspiration that I should use Google Translator. And
what was the question?
I mean, we were showing Bhagavad Gita and books to Japanese lady. She didn't know any other language.
No, I understand that part. Did you ask a question? I couldn't understand. Oh, it wasn't a question. It was just
I asked Sham Jagannath Prabhu how he got the idea that to use this Google Translator, but he said that it was inspiration from Krishna.
Google Translate. Yeah, Google Translate's one of our best devotees. And it's getting better all the time. Ma Guna just told me yesterday that most of the books in Japanese are translated into English very well by Google Translate on Android. At least they can read through, because a lot of them aren't fully translated properly, but I think it's increasing more and more. So yes, good for you, and well done. Thanks for joining tonight for a session of discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. And now we're going to have some kirtan. So we're going to move the asanas and this rug out of the way, and we'll open up this floor. And then we're going to have an artik ceremony where we get to sing and dance and chant the Maha Mantra. Thank you very much for joining us online from various places around the world. Gaur Premanande Haribo.